going to be looking at rounding whole numbers. So how this is useful is to estimate numbers and get numbers that are easier to work with. 50 is a lot easier to work with than 47. So how this applies in real life is if I had 18 minutes to get to where my next appointment is, I don't usually say, oh, I've got 18 minutes. I'll say something like, I've got 20 minutes, because that's an easier number to wrap your head around. So the same thing applies with some of these things that we do in math. So I've listed the steps, and we're going to look at a couple examples here. So the first step says underline the number at the place value the question refers to. All right, so the question says round to the hundreds place. So if I'm looking at this one, I want to find the number that's in the hundreds place. So ones, tens, 100s. I'm looking at that 5. And if you look at that little note underneath it, this is the number that you're either going to keep or increase by 1. And that's called rounding up. So either we stay where we are or we round up. The second step says to circle the number to the right of the underlined number. So we go to the right and we're going to circle this 3. This 3 is going to determine whether we round up or we stay where we are at that 5. If the circled number is 4 or less, we stay where we are. We don't mess with that 5. If that circled number is 5 or more, then we're rounding up. And the example I gave you, it was 18 minutes. I rounded up to 20 minutes. It wouldn't make sense to say, I've got 10 minutes at 18. We want to round up. That gives us a better estimate. So I look at this, 3. 3 is 4 or less. So I'm going to stay where I am. So in my answer, I'm going to stay with that 5. And then in 4, we're going to change all the numbers after that 5 to 0. So that 3 becomes 0, and that 4 becomes 0. That makes sense. 534 is fairly close to 500. So let's look at the next one. 34,000, 792. So again, we're looking at the hundreds place. So that 7 is in the hundreds place. Ones, tens, 100s. My second step, circle that number to the right. So I'm going to circle that 9. All right. So I'm looking at my circled number. If it's 4 or less, I stay with the 7. If it's 5 or more, I round that 7 up to 8. I increase it by 1. So it's at a 9. So 9 is greater than 5. So we're going to go ahead and round up. So this one's a little different because we have some numbers in front of that 7. When we have numbers in front of it, to the left, we keep them. We do not change anything to the left of our underlined number. So I'm going to say 3, 4. I'm rounding that 7 up. So I want to increase it by 1. So 7, 8. And then circled number and anything after the circled number becomes 0. So 0, 0. Again, that makes sense, right? That 792 is very close to 800. So we're just rounding it up because this is easier to work with. It's easier to wrap our brains around. It makes things easier for us. All right, let's look at this last example right here. 1,953. My first step, underline the number that it's looking for. We're still working with the hundreds place. So I'm going to go ahead and underline what's in the hundreds place. Ones, tens, 100s. All right, my second step, I'm going to circle the number that's to the right of my underlined number. So then I get to look at them. 5. So if it's 4 or less, we stay with 9. 5 and above, we round up. Looking at this, we have a 5, so we're going to be rounding up. Here's where it gets a little tricky. If we have a 9, what's 1 more than 9? Well, 10. How do we write 10 in that place value? So when we have a 10, that means the 0 is here, and this 1 is added to this value. So instead of it's being a 1 and a 9, it becomes a 2 and a 0. We round it all the way up. So 2, 0, that's what that became. Again, we can look at it as 19. How do we increase 19 by 1? 19, 20. So that's what I became, 20. Increase the whole thing by 1. And so then we take the circled number and the numbers after become 0, 0. Again, it makes sense. 1,953 is very close to 2,000. All right, so I want you to go ahead and look at those last 3 examples. We're looking at the tens place now. I want you to go ahead and try those 3, and then we'll go ahead and review them. Got a chance to try those 3 on your own, let's go ahead and review them. So we're working with the tens place now. So the tens place value is the number we're going to underline. So looking at this, ones, tens. Underline 7 and circle the 2. So I'm looking at this 2. It is 4 or less. So I'm going to stay with that 7. So I'm going to copy that, 3, 7, and then circled number and anything after becomes 0, 370. All right, let's look at this one. This is a little tricky. There's nothing in that tens place. So I'm going to underline the space in front. Because we have nothing, there's still that place value there. It's just like having a 0 there. So we can even go ahead, add a 0 there. All right. And so then we're going to circle that 9. 9 is 5 or greater, so we're going to round up. What's 1 more than 0? 1. So we're just going to add that 1, and that 9 becomes 0. All right, last one. So our 9 is in our tens place. We're going to circle that 8. 8 is 5 or above, so we're going to add 1 to 9. 9 becomes 10, and that 8 becomes 0. Again, looking at this, 98 is very close to 100. So if we're rounding, we can have this 100, which is a lot easier to work with than that 98. All right, so go ahead, do this practice, and you're done with rounding whole numbers.